the Thracian coast, Greece. At the northern end of the Aegean Sea lie the ruins of an ancient metropolis. 2,500 years ago, Abdera was a thriving seaport and trading center. It was a wealthy hub of commerce between empires and the home of one of history's greatest thinkers, Democritus.
Democritus was a Greek philosopher in the 5th century before the Common Era. He was not just a philosopher, but a scientific theorist. In fact, his great gifts have led him to be revered as the father of modern science.
Democritus was born to a wealthy family and educated by Persian magi, learned priests who were said to control the fates.
It was believed that he was trained by the Magi, these priests of the East, and that he also traveled to Egypt and to Babylon and studied with the secret masters who had these ancient wisdom teachings hidden in their lineage.
Democritus traveled quite a bit, and through his travels learned quite a lot, traveling east through what we call the ancient Near East, studying with the Magi and studying with Chaldeans who were known for their magical, mysterious learnings and their magical, mysterious knowledge as well.
Through his travels and his interactions with people said to have mysterious knowledge, the young philosopher and mathematician came up with a radical theory concerning all matter in the universe. Democritus theorized that everything, people, plants, stone, and sun, were made of the same stuff, tiny particles he called atomos.
He developed an early version of the atomic theory. It is an early theory of everything in the world being made up of these very, very small invisible particles, which Democritus called atoms.
Democritus argued that there's a fundamental building block. Even though we couldn't see them, that was the theory, the philosophical theory that was in ancient Greece. This is long before science.
When Democritus was talking about atoms, it's amazing how close he got to what we really know. What he was motivated by was the idea that if you cut something up, the pieces still have the same properties. And so he just did the thought experiment. Well, if I keep cutting it smaller, then eventually I'll have the smallest possible piece, and that's the atom. And that's what gives it its properties. That's basically our picture of matter now. That smallest piece is the protons, neutrons, and the electron that make up the atom.
What Democritus articulated 2,500 years ago is remarkably similar to today's standard model of physics, the basis of our search for the Higgs boson, or God particle. But how could Democritus have known about the atom and the forces that govern it? Could it be that Democritus had access to advanced and perhaps even extraterrestrial information about the quantum realm? Some ancient astronaut theorists believe that the answer may lie in an even more radical suggestion Democritus made about the cosmos.
In his writings, Democritus proposed that there are many worlds and that these worlds even sustained life. Now, could it be that by other worlds, he was maybe even referring to parallel universes?
As we fast forward from Democritus to the more current era, where the idea of parallel universes has really taken off is the multi-universe view, where all possible universes has occurred. This is very similar to Democritus' idea of making all possible universes, but now they're very much next to each other, parallel in space as well as occurring in time.
Some cosmologists today believe our universe is one of many, and that the God particle could lead us to discovering these other universes. Is it possible that Democritus had knowledge of this 2,500 years ago? And might that information have come to him not only from a different world, but perhaps a different universe.
Democritus claimed to communicate with what he thought were parallel worlds. He sometimes would exercise his energy by going into places of the dead and would receive what he thought were voices and information which would predict the future.
Some accounts of Democritus describe him as having access to magical powers with which he could control the weather and predict natural disasters. He also allegedly communicated with what he referred to as other worlds, and he described images and voices that came to him, giving him all sorts of information.
Is it possible that the priests of the Magi, the priests of the Egyptian mystery schools, and the priests of Babylon taught him some form of ancient practice that allows the human body to become an instrument to connect directly on a telepathic level with extraterrestrial beings?
The more that we draw forth in science, we're going to discover the truths of the past that have long been hidden from us. Yes, mankind has been directed from the beginning.
Storrs, Connecticut, January 2012. In a lab at the University of Connecticut, theoretical physicist Ronald Mallett demonstrates his large-scale model of a time machine. Using a device called a ring laser that produces a circulating beam of light, the professor hopes to prove that the twisting light actually bends space, forming a loop in time.
Now what's happening here is that these lasers, even though you can't see it, they're actually creating a circulating pattern of light. And that circulating pattern of light is actually twisting the empty space in here. The twisting of space will eventually lead to a twisting of time. In Einstein's theory, the two are connected. And that twisting of time will be where time travel is occurring, because if you think of time as being a straight line, then if we twist space, then what will happen eventually is that the space will twist time into a loop. So breakthrough my work was to use light to manipulate time, and that should allow for the possibility of going back in time using light.
Although this is only a prototype, Mallett believes he may be able to create a working time machine in as little as 10 years. He believes the energy of the light beams will produce a gravitational field strong enough to drag a spinning neutron through time.
Let's say I'll call the spin up a 1, and I'll call spin down a 0. So imagine I send a stream of neutrons with spin up, spin up, spin down, spin up. What do you call that? That's binary code. So by using the spin of neutrons, I could send a binary code, which could be translated into a message.
But could this technology ultimately be able to send larger objects through time, like a person or a spacecraft?
Einstein's theory of relativity allowed for something called the Einstein-Rosen bridge, which is what we today call a wormhole. It opened up the possibility that we can travel from point A on Earth to point B somewhere else in the universe, as if there were nothing in between.
If the possibility exists to travel instantly from one end of the universe to another through wormholes, might there be evidence that such technology was used in the ancient past?
The ancient Egyptians knew about Stargate and wormhole travel. The evidence that I discovered is at the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. When you enter into this temple, you look up on the ceiling, which is called the astronomical ceiling, and you see the gods as ascended light beings traveling on their ships of eternity. And it suggests to me that the ancients didn't use the term wormhole for these time travel portals, but were clearly talking about the same thing.
Is it possible, as ancient astronaut theorists believe, that advanced celestial beings traveled in time through wormholes on their way to Earth? Or might they have possessed an even more advanced time travel technology, perhaps based on the complex science of quantum physics? Albert Einstein's incredible legacy, which includes over 300 scientific papers, continues to influence the world more than a half-century since his death. And while Einstein redefined our understanding of the universe, perhaps his greatest contribution to mankind is still to come: time travel.
It's Einstein's special theory of relativity, speed of light, and the general theory of relativity, which allows for the real possibility of time travel.
Some scientists today believe that Einstein's theory of relativity creates the possibility to travel through a portal or wormhole called an Einstein-Rosen bridge, a space anomaly that may actually be a gateway to parallel universes.
In the theory of general relativity, space actually acts like something that you can bend and warp and make holes in. So an Einstein-Rosen bridge is a particular example of a wormhole. And a wormhole is a structure in space and time that involves kind of tearing a hole in space, stretching the material, if you think of space being a material, and reconnecting it somewhere else.
An Einstein-Rosen bridge takes 2 points in space and connects them so that if you travel in one end, you come out the other. Even though those 2 points appear in different universes, it's essentially a teleporter, something that allows you to get between two distant places instantaneously.
Could Einstein's theoretical wormhole actually serve as a portal to another universe? Perhaps opening a gateway that will one day establish contact between humans and extraterrestrials.
When we take a look at the idea that there are wormholes, and that these are actually generally accepted by some of the most brilliant individuals on the planet, what you begin to see is that all of these pieces are in place to suggest that there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, and that there is also the likelihood or possibility that we have had contact in the past, or have ongoing contact now, or may have contact in the future as well.
Was Albert Einstein's monumental work actually a lifelong quest to establish contact with extraterrestrials? Did otherworldly beings provide him with information about how to transcend both space and time? If so, why?
We find that the greatest discoveries across time and space don't come through hard work or intensive labor, but that really the genius somehow is able to access a realm, and that realm is able to pretty much download that information to them and makes them remember forever onwards as geniuses.
In history, you have certain people whose genius is just so incredible. It's like they're able to see the future, and they're not going to just influence the world then and in the future, but what they're going to do is going to dramatically change the world forever.
We tend to think of civilization as this slow ebb of information, that somehow across the flow of time we have progressed. But really this is not the case. We have made giant strides forwards because at pockets in time there were certain geniuses living.
Are extraterrestrials accelerating the cognitive abilities of a select few to help further the development of human civilization, as some ancient astronaut theorists believe? Could this explain Albert Einstein's extraordinary neural anatomy?
Is it only a coincidence that arguably the greatest mind in the history of the world had a higher concentration of glial cells and a wider parietal lobe than the average human brain, and was as healthy as the brain of a young man when he died? That is extraordinary evidence.
If we were able to study the brains of some of these other geniuses, Isaac Newton, of Nikola Tesla, and perhaps now of someone like Stephen Hawking, I think we would find that their brains too are significantly different than a normal human's.
there seems to be something within our DNA whereby we go in one direction and we seem to have a normal human being, but also certain things within our DNA are able to make us a genius. And definitely Einstein was one of them. But what makes this switch work is something which we have been completely incapable of answering.
Abydos, Egypt, 300 miles south of Cairo. This 5,000-year-old archaeological site near the Nile River was a burial place for the first kings of Egypt. The ancient city was a major center of religious pilgrimage, where Osiris, the god of the underworld, was revered.
Osiris was the god that was said to have brought wisdom and knowledge to those who preceded the dynastic Egyptians. Abydos was a place that people came to communicate with Osiris.
It was considered the place where the god Osiris had been buried. Osiris had been the originator of the pharaonic civilization. He was the first pharaoh, if you like. The myth is that Osiris was cut in several pieces by his evil brother, and the head was found and kept at Abydos.
Abydos was said to have been the burial place of Osiris. But this is where he was supposed to physically stand guard between this world and the next.
Construction on the largest of the temples at Abydos was started in the 13th century BC by the pharaoh Seti and is dedicated to Osiris. Depicted on the wall of the temple's Osiris Chapel is a mysterious hieroglyph that some researchers believe represents the vessel that held the head of the powerful god.
The relic of Abydos. It is this sort of bell-shaped object, and on top of it is usually two plumes.
When we look at the hieroglyphs of the head of Osiris, what we see is something that appears to be very technological or mechanical. It looks like some kind of an ancient antenna type of a device.
Might this depiction of Osiris really represent an ancient technological device? One so important that the Egyptians memorialized it here on the walls of this sacred temple. And if so, what was its purpose? Some ancient astronaut theorists believe more clues can be found on the opposite wall of the chapel, where Pharaoh Seti is shown transforming into this Osiris device while traveling on a solar barge.
The solar barge was a vehicle that was able to make that journey from this world to the next. So in other words, in many ways, it was actually a boat of the stars.
But the shape of the solar barge bears a curious similarity to the Einstein-Rosen bridge. So the solar barge could be a primitive depiction of people watching a luminous Stargate appearing and then it being used as a teleportation device.
On the depiction of the solar barge, the head of Pharaoh Seti appears to be emerging from that portal. Perhaps Seti was a time traveler utilizing just such technology given to him by the ancient gods.
It suggests that Seti utilized this ancient technology to turn himself into a star being so that he could travel the stargates and wormholes for eternity.
Maybe gods like Osiris were actually extraterrestrials using this Stargate technology to come to Earth and teach mankind.
Could these hieroglyphs really be depicting a device that allowed Pharaoh Seti to travel across time and space? Is it possible that the Egyptians and other ancient cultures around the world really encountered extraterrestrials who came to Earth through stargates?
Just because our scientists of today haven't quite figured it out yet doesn't mean that some other civilization, thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of years older, hasn't figured out either. Remember, the universe is infinite, which means that there are infinite possibilities.
We may have known in the past what was going on and about these portals and wormholes. And that is why stories like astral travel and stargates and interdimensional voyages are something that we've been hearing about for thousands of years, and we're just now rediscovering it for ourselves. This knowledge given to us by the extraterrestrials.
It's possible that this is the next step in human evolution. It will represent a new beginning for humankind, and perhaps this was always the plan from the ancient times. We were created by these ancient gods who came here in stargates and wormholes, and they intended for us to one day join them in the stars.